Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Unwokable Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Owsley, and today I am joined by Lisa Logan. Lisa Logan is host of the Parents of Patriots podcast, and she has a Substack called the Education Manifesto. Lisa is a warrior for truth. Lisa is a researcher extraordinaire. She has done an amazing amount of work when it comes to 4.0 schools, the school choice issue. And I asked her to come here today because she has a presentation that I think everyone should see. As you know, I've been asking questions about school choice for a while, and my message has been, let's make school choice woke proof. Well, Lisa has an abundant amount of information that if we have any hope of making school choice woke proof, we have to know this information. So, Lisa, thank you so much for being here. It's really great to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna come at this just like some of my audience would. Say I was, I like the idea of school choice. I like the idea of parents being able to choose and having educational freedom and being able to move things around. What what is the problems that I don't know about, and what do you have to tell me about that?
I think I kind of summed it up in my tweet I did last night. People have taken over the educational system, right? Completely changed it. So its whole purpose is something different than what parents think it is. Then we have the issue of another choice being given. What is school choice? But what it will do is actually create a monopoly, and I'll kind of show you how that is the case. And also, the whole plan eventually is to do away with the public school system entirely. And of course, this choice option that they'll have is actually going to be run by public-private partnerships, which will be no choice at all at that point because everything will look the same.
So public-private partnerships. There's a name for that under, you know.
Communofascism?
Yes, yes. Well, and here's the deal, and I think there's this narrative shift happening, or this narrative that's being created. That if so, I obviously my channel is called Unwokable, right? I'm an unwoke warrior, so to speak. I am against wokeism in general, but what I am afraid of, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is that there might be some alignment between what the woke want and what these corporations want in terms of indoctrinating kids towards specific things. Would that be correct?
That is completely correct. And we're seeing that in our school system right now because, basically our whole educational system right now is about creating kids that are college and career ready, right? It's about preparing children for the workforce. I mean, this is huge. You hear this all over the place in education. But what we have to remember is that workforce right now, if you look around the landscape, I don't know if your audience has ever heard of ESG. It stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. And basically, businesses have moved from a shareholder capitalism model, where their main idea is to have a return on profit for their investors, to a stakeholder capitalism model, in which they're kind of having to look around the community and do what the stakeholders want, and in regards to the environment, having environmental sustainable practices, in regards to supporting social causes that their stakeholders want, even down to their hiring practices, whether it be of affirmative action or other stuff that we'll talk about today. And if they don't comply with these stakeholder demands, this is all linked to what's called an ESG score. So if companies don't have a great ESG score, businesses and investors just won't do business with them. So, I mean, they're literally being costed out of business. I mean, strong-armed with a, ring in their nose, being led around by these stakeholders. And you'll see in my presentation, there's a specific agenda behind those stakeholders.
Yeah, well, and we're going to get into your presentation, but if my audience has been paying attention, they know about some ESG. They've heard that from me, and I think that to be very clear, the S in ESG is social justice. It is wokeism in general, and so They don't really buy into the kind of rebranded attempt of that some are doing to rebrand DEI in more of a MLK model. They explicitly reject that, and that is something I want the audience to understand, that there's going to be no rebranding of the S and ESG, because they don't get their political motivation and their political return out of a just colorblind society. They have to have division, and this is what's going to be implanted into schools. But I want to just go ahead and get your presentation started. I'm going to let you go, and we're going to talk, and we may have some questions as we go on. But everyone has to listen to what Lisa's saying here. This is one of the most important things I've seen so far, just information wise. You don't have to come out of this being against school choice. What I want you to come out of this with is being able to ask the right questions, so that if as we move forward into the legislative process, especially here in Oklahoma, that you can ask the right questions. And Lisa's the person that really has all this information. So we're going to throw this up here, and Lisa, I'm going to let you go.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And I want to make the point, Mark, that this stance of bringing up these questions is not popular.
No.
People don't like to be questioned, and I think it's because people are really in despair about the public school system. Right? We see all of this woke stuff, this DEI, this social emotional learning that's messing with our kids' minds and things like that, and people are looking for an escape, and not just an escape, but an easy escape. And so when someone hands you a bunch of money and says, "Here's your ticket out," I think parents put a lot of hope in that, and I get that. It's really disgusting what's happening in our schools, but we cannot just think about what's right in front of our face. Yes, we need an escape from the public school system. We need to reform the public school system. It's a huge question of whether or not that's possible. But more than that, we need to be thinking long term. How do we preserve our educational freedom for the long term? And if taking this money means that we entrench more control into the system and take away options later, that's something that we need to be thinking about. And
right.
So, yeah.
Well, and like I like to say, the progressivism progresses,
Yes.
and it does not ever. It does not ever stop. It has no stop button. And when we talk about progressivism, we're talking about big government, but also now a big government corporate alliance that are moving towards a different goal than what you have for your kids and what we have in mind for our country in the future. And they do this all under the guise of morality or equity at different times, which I think is very interesting. But and we'll get it. I'm sure you're going to get into that, and we're going to ask questions. But my main point here, and my audience has heard me say this, is that retreat is not combat. And I think part of the reason we're in the situation today is because we had a whole host of people leave the public schools over the last 30 or 40 or 50 years, since prayer was taken out of school, for example, in 62, I believe, right? That you just had this slow trickle, and we lost the cultural influence on the public schools. Well, it seems to me that we're kind of setting ourselves up for this same situation when it comes to our parochial schools, our religious schools. But I digress, and we will get into that later. I want to get this going, but yeah, it's a very good point.
Yes. So at the beginning, I write on Substack on Education Manifesto, of course, and this article came out first before I did the video, and I called it "The Theft of Education." And we'll dive into this a whole lot more in a minute. But basically, what has been considered college and career ready has been stolen. So I wanted to start with this video. It may seem silly, but it's literally what's happening right now in our schools. Tell me if you can't hear it.
I can hear it a little bit. You might turn it up a little. I'm going to turn it up. Oh, we all recognize this.
Yeah, right. Such an iconic scene, right? He's
Hmm.
has to figure like even take some of the sand out of the bag, and he tries to figure out like what's going to be the right weight to like switch it out so that the pressure plate doesn't go down and all the booby traps, come after him. Although that kind of happened at the end anyway. And I hope that parents can kind of be the booby traps, right? As
Hmm.
we see that our education system has been swapped out for something else that begins with an S, and it's not sand. So, but it's true.
Yeah,
um,
that's right.
and because we used to send our kids to school to be educated, right? To
Hmm.
to learn all the academic skills they could learn so that they could be successful in whatever avenue they chose in life. But now the whole purpose of education is to bring kids into the education to workforce pipeline.
Hmm.
And like I just said, college and career ready has been stolen and now replaced by a new definition that requires social justice activism in order to be college and career ready. And because all of these changes have happened, the whole education, like the whole thing that your kids go to school for is now just focused around building what they call emotional intelligence through social emotional skills. And it's literally embedded into everything. It's embedded into assessments. It's embedded into your state standards. It's embedded into
Hmm.
um, all the accountability measures, right? In fact,
Right. Well,
states,
let me just make one point
yeah.
here while you're
Hmm.
saying to take it home to my viewers at home. Stephanie Williams, the DEI director of Norman Public Schools, in her
Hmm.
DEI teacher training, said that that equity or um, DEI or diversity or inclusion must be embedded in everything that a teacher. These are her words. Must be embedded everything that you do, not in addition to.
Right.
And that
Yeah,
is the SEL component, right? It
completely.
embeds this in everything you do. So I just wanted to make that point, bring it home for the audience. Go ahead.
Yeah, and SEL is synonymous with wokeness. A lot of people think it's a great thing and it could be useful. And it originally was brought in as like a tier two solution to deal with students who just didn't get the social emotional training at home, right? Most kids kind of are cemented in their social emotional skills by the age of 5 just by observing healthy relationships at home, right? Having that balance. And those kids who were brought in to school that maybe did not have that stable home environment needed to have extra instruction. So that's kind of where SEL started. But where it's gone is that it's now a tier one whole school solution because when the Every Student Succeeds Act was passed in 2015, they made it a requirement for states to report back to the federal government because they were receiving Title I funds on non-cognitive factors like school climate, like social emotional learning. So a lot of schools adopted this. And again, what you assess or what you have to report on, you have to assess. What you assess, you have to teach. What you have to teach has to be involved in your standards. So we see this whole infiltration of what it means to go to school, right? And it's becoming less and less about academics and more about building these social emotional skills. Um, and I think I already just covered this ESG. Um, we moved to a stakeholder capitalism model. And I want to make the point that under governance of
Mm.
ESG, it used to mean hiring people based on kind of affirmative action policies, right? We're making sure we have all the races represented and, gender equality and all of that stuff. And that's all great, as far as like we need to make sure that we're not discriminating against people when it comes to hiring. But now there's a new type of discrimination. And so, again, the whole purpose of social emotional learning is to inculcate in students skills that the workforce desires. So, again, if the workforce is enslaved to ESG, then what are we
Mhm.
teaching the kids? So now they're talking about governance and in regards to hiring being about hiring people with high emotional intelligence. So, you might come to the interview with great grades and a great history as far as your jobs go and a great college resume, and yet maybe you won't get hired if you don't score well in social justice. So I think that's something that we need
Well,
to
and let's connect that
about.
back just real
Yeah.
fast. Let's connect that
Mhm.
back to what just was uncovered by Project Veritas, where
Mhm.
he sat down with
Totally.
the principal in New York, an assistant principal in New York, and he said, if they don't answer the right DEI questions the right way,
Mm-hmm.
if they present a colorblind way of thinking that, although well intentioned, is what he said, does not um, express the depth of understanding of what we believe in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is what she was just talking. That's emotional intelligence, right? That
Mm-hmm.
is
Totally.
and that's the indoctrination. You must believe this way to work here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And here you see Forbes talking about, the tide shifting away from hiring brilliant jerks. Um, I guess if you don't have the right mindset, you're a brilliant jerk. And then 6 Seconds, the Emotional Intelligence Networks literally thinks that emotional intelligence or hiring based on emotional intelligence is the way to dismantle systemic racism. So um, there you go. And I think what a lot of people don't know or understand is that ESGs are actually based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You may be asking yourself, why are the United Nations influencing the practices of our corporations? But this is the CEO of Bank of America, and listen to him talk about it. We'll only listen to a short clip of it because you heard him mention the SDGs. Well, probably the whole thing because I think
That's
I
fine.
need to hear him
We
say
got
to
time.
the end.
You got
All right.
time. Can you turn that up? We're not really hearing it. Hold on. No, on the video. The video. Sorry. Let me see if I can. Yeah, we're not really hearing it.
You're not hearing it?
No. I'm sorry, folks.
It's okay.
Here, let me make sure. Goodness. Yeah, it's not really coming through. Can you just explain what he says?
Can you hear it now?
No.
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
it's okay.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Sorry, everyone. Little
Yeah,
technical
sorry about
difficulties
that.
there.
I am
Well,
not a
it's
technical
just as me.
person.
Neither am I really, and so that's where we're at. If you just explain what he's going, and I'll look and see if I can fix it a little bit here.
So all he basically says there is that the big four work together. All of the UN metrics are based upon the people, planet, prosperity from this right here. Principles of governance. Those are all based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And he talks there at the end, about human capital and how, how it's all about building human capital. So I want to, for your viewers, if they don't know what the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and they're basically goals that the United Nations, all the member states set that guide their funding and direct their focus for like a 15-year period. So they're the Millennium Development Goals were 2015. Now we're in the Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030, and all those goals they want to accomplish by 2030. And if you look at these goals, some of them sound really amazing, right? Zero hunger, no poverty, quality education. But it could be argued that some are being pursued through the domination of civilization to achieve these ends. And so what I want to focus on is Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is quality and inclusive education for all. And the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, is in charge of that goal. And if you look there at Target 4.7, it says, education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And UNESCO really believes that through global citizenship education or education for sustainable development, that all learners should basically be learning the same things so that they can empower them to assume active roles both locally and globally in building more peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, and secure societies. And I always make the point in my presentations that a lot depends on who is defining terms like these and how they're going to measure them. And Kimberly L., she's a friend of mine, great author. She wrote a book called The Invincible Family. Basically, she was one of the first people I uncovered when I started researching the connections between social emotional learning and the United Nations, you start thinking to yourself, am I going crazy? Like, am I really seeing this?
Yeah.
I know other, people who I knew and I just happened upon her book on the internet, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's making the same connections as me. And she has spent a lot of time up at the UN. So she knows what she's talking about. She has really uncovered the agenda through SEL and how they're trying to sexualize our children through it. We're going to go over that a little bit in a minute, but she says here that equitable and inclusive are elastic terms open to a wide range of interpretations. If deference to equity or equality is required, then young people who embrace the concept of free market systems wherein inequalities are allowed may be tagged as harboring attitudes that are unacceptably inequitable and targeted for re-education. If inclusiveness is applied to matters of sex, then holding specific beliefs about sexual conduct may be assessed as non-inclusive and therefore undesirable. In fact, inclusivity is commonly used to express acceptance of sexual variance. So it shouldn't surprise you that UNESCO is one of the prime supporters of the teaching of comprehensive sexuality education, which is far more comprehensive than most people understand or probably would want to know. And they also partner with the International Planned Parenthood Federation. So
really quick,
yeah.
can you just what is UNESCO? I know that you had mentioned you said the name of it, but can you just give us a quick summary of what UNESCO is as an organization?
It's connected to the UN. It's just a UN agency, basically.
It's a UN agency, okay, right? And there are, from what we understand, some school choice people that are connected to that.
Yes.
Yes, there are. But also, I want to make the point, because of what's going on here at home, when she talks about comprehensive sexuality education, we had a teacher here that resigned because she wasn't allowed to share the book Genderqueer in her classroom, and is now a national activist. She did this on the first day of school, by the way, and then promptly went to a reporter. The reporter made it look like she was fired. She wasn't. She ended up resigning so that she could become an activist.
Interesting.
But the entire community now is very much in an uproar because because we're banning books, which no books were banned. It was, you can't have pornography in the classroom, right? Because and so to take this back home, what she's talking about here in terms of comprehensive sexuality education, being inclusive, means including these books, no matter what's in them, because you can't pejorativize or demonize anybody's sexual conduct and or the presentation of anyone's sexual conduct.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And it goes back to, a lot of the folks at the UN who are pushing this stuff believe that children are born sexual. It's like really, Missy Cara is a great, Missiecarra. She has a fabulous presentation out there on what is behind comprehensive sexuality education. It's Alfred Kinsey, this guy who did crazy experiments on young children and stimulating them and find out how many times they could peak in 24 hours, very young children, even as young as 4. Wow. And they believe that children are born sexual and that children deserve their sexual rights. So that's why UNESCO, in their document that talks about comprehensive sexuality education that I've put up here in this slide, they believe children 5 to 8 years old should learn about sexual behaviors. And kids as young as 9 learn about self-stimulation and pleasure. So that's the thing, they prime them early for this stuff because they believe they have a right to know it. That's just disgusting to me. I mean, we have to protect the innocence of children. And there's so much information out there about what happens if you expose children to this material so early, right? It damages their brain. I mean, I've watched enough serial killer
right.
And that's not to say that every kid's going to turn into a serial killer, but it puts lesions on their brains, right? When they're exposed to this stuff too early. And those are the type of people that become very sexual and or addicted to porn, have problems building relationships. They have to get harder and harder pornography in order to stimulate the dopamine response. So, I mean, we know that there's evidence out there about what happens when we expose children too early to material like this.
Right. Well, and if anybody read The Brave New World in school, I know it's always, but that whole that was at the end of this process. I know it's fiction, it is, but there's so many parallels here that the author took from real life happenings with children and what would happen to people um, and their minds as you sexualized a society from a very young age. And the fact is that when you're trying to expose kids to this kind of stuff at a young, and we can see it now here in Norman, Oklahoma, right? These books have to be in front of them. We have to be able to show this. We have to be able, it becomes like an iron on your hand, right? If you were to burn your hand, it hurts really bad. And then, as you burn more, eventually you're going to stop feeling it. And so by the time that the kid is an adult, they cannot grasp what it's like to form a real individual, meaningful relationship. So all this goes down to the breaking of the family unit.
Yes.
And I think Lisa's probably going to get into that, but it's just the family. This is an attack on the nuclear family, and this what Lisa's talking about here is the strings or the little pinpoints that they're using to start that attack.
Right. And that book I'd mentioned, The Invincible Family, I mean, that's the whole purpose of that book, about how this agenda's whole purpose is to break down the nuclear family. Because, how do you protect kids from these ideologies? They need to have a strong relationship with their parents. I mean, that is literally the thing that I say at the end of every presentation that I do, is parents, make sure you're sitting down with your kids and having dinner every night. Make sure you're having conversations about what they're seeing at school. If you have those communication lines open and you're close to your kids and they know they can come to you and that they trust you, that is how you protect your child from this, right? Because then their family bonds are so strong that they don't look to the world to be their family. So I know it's kind of a little bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
No, but I think that's you hear our former mayor, who was the head of who not the head, but worked for the national PTA, national PTO, talk about this all the time, even just in parlance, where she talks about the family you have and the family you choose. And that's every time she mentioned family, that's what she would say. And the message, the implicit message there is, look, your parents don't support who you are on the inside, and therefore, we will. So it's a mechanism, an implicit mechanism to take your kids away from you and your parents away from your kids. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, for sure. And one of the things that Brian Moynihan mentioned from Bank of America was the accumulation of human capital. And that's what this is all about, right? Or the importance of human capital. And
just
so
even that term, human capital.
Right. Your value, right? As a human.
I can't get over that term. It sounds so communistic. I mean, sorry, human capital. That means you are, and this is why I have a problem with the term, let the money follow the child. Honestly, because it seems like you're monetizing them.
Right.
You're
exactly.
monetizing them. And children are not commodities. Yes.
And right. Well, and this is the whole idea that humans are a commodity, right? And it used to mean, even in a broader sense, right? Like what you contributed to society as your individual qualities that you brought that help to advance, the economy, right? As a person, like what you possessed as an individual, and what that's now, and governments and civil society organizations and monetary organizations and also the private sector all, invest in things that build human capital, right? Because they want the economy to succeed. But now it's, and so they invest in things like nutrition and healthcare and quality education and jobs and skills. And the World Bank, who has this thing called the Human Capital Project, says at the end there that this is key to ending extreme poverty and creating more inclusive societies. And there's that word again, right? Inclusive. So it's no longer about your individual skills that you contribute, right? As a part of a bunch of individuals. It's now what you contribute to their collective vision of what they believe society should be. And so if those skills aren't there, you, I guess, don't have a lot of human capital. And so, I talked about this paper, and actually James Lindsay even talked about it on his recent long form podcast on SEL. But this paper, Yeah,
Go check
please go
that
check
out
that out.
on
So much good
newdiscourses.com.
information.
Yep.
Right. So much good information in there. But this paper is like literally the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life because it's so honest. Here you see at the top, it's called psychodata. And they talk about basically, it says that psychological, economic, and statistical infrastructure of social emotional learning. In short, right, literally this paper talks about the infrastructure of businesses, think tanks, philanthropies, software companies, investment schemes, and all the international organizations. So all the people we just kind of talked about investing in human capital, investing and putting a lot of time and effort into social emotional learning and influencing policy in that regard. And there's a huge push internationally for this to be a measurable outcome. They're using it to predict the success of the economy based on how well they're able to move humans' minds, which is just disgusting right here. They say at the top here, in particular, it demonstrates how social emotional learning is being positioned as a proxy for socioeconomic value as international organizations seek statistical data on the human psychological characteristics and emotional intelligence, there's that word again too, that are required by labor markets to maximize the productivity potential of new computer-based automated systems and artificial intelligence. So, SEL proponents will tell you all day long, this is about kids learning how to manage their emotions and the emotions of others and building great relationships. I don't hear any of that in this paragraph. This is about believing that they believe that the future is all going to be automated, all just artificial intelligence, and that the only skills that we'll need is the social emotional skills. Because they say that basically that has to be paired with the AI. And it's ridiculous, right?
Well, I must point out that the World Economic Forum, their head, I forgot his name, Dr. Evil, not Klaus Schwab, but his right hand man talks
Harare?
about hacking the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And this is embedded into so many things, even down to, the game Minecraft, which I uncovered at the WEF, that they're moving people, they call it social nudging.
Yes.
Right? Where they just kind of push you towards a certain mode of action, and that becomes almost a faith-based thing, and then it becomes a part of your moral code, so to speak, and they nudge you into that in all to benefit a economic hierarchy, and so you can fit in and support that economic hierarchy, and that being your main goal is human capital, that being your main purpose as human capital, right?
Yeah, and interesting to note that I'm going to go into Committee for Children, they own Second Step, that social emotional learning program I was just talking about, and also they partner with another company called SEL in EDU, and the guy who they are heavily tied in with Minecraft, which
yes.
So it's all one big incestuous pool of yuck is basically what,
sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, they're just saying that they're turning attention to social emotional skills as a way of inculcating appropriate emotional skills. So they get to choose which ones are appropriate or not to pair with computerized artificial intelligence. And in these ways, it is making the production of human computer capital, where human emotional intelligence is calibrated to the demands of artificial intelligence, into the legitimate target and task of education, policy, and governance. That is the whole purpose of what your kids are learning at school.
Can you just unpack that, because it goes a little bit word salady for the common person? So that statement there, that last, in these ways.
Right. In these ways, it's making the production of human computer capital. So again, pairing that artificial intelligence with our social emotional skills.
Neuralink, which you've been hearing Elon Musk even talk about, which is a Neuralink, right? That's part of it. But beyond that, just your connection with your devices and with your technology, correct?
Right. Where human emotional intelligence is calibrated or shifted, right, to the demands of artificial intelligence. They're deciding ahead of time what that artificial intelligence needs, then saying, well, now this is what your kid needs to learn at school, and we're going to calibrate their personality and their behaviors and what they think to this computer intelligence. And so it's become, again, the target and task of educational policy. So everything that is written in your educational documents, right? All of the stuff that's written out, this, it has to align to what you're teaching at school and governance. So this is the whole purpose of education now. And here they say, even intervening in the shaping of children's personalities to achieve economic ends. That should scare your audience a whole lot.
So this is literally the definition of teaching kids what to think and not how to think.
Right. Exactly. It's
Right.
completely disgusting. So, why do they want to intervene? What is the purpose of intervening? So that they will want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We see this right here. Social emotional learning for SDGs. This is from a UNESCO publication. And they go into this paper about how kids, their individuality kind of clashes with what has to be sacrificed in order to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So they have a hard time kind of grappling with that in their minds, and it causes this cognitive dissonance. And so they literally say that, and they use this kind of creepy interpretation of E equals MC squared. You see their emotion, empathy, mindfulness, and compassion plus critical inquiry. That's critical consciousness.
Right. And again, critical consciousness is not critical thinking, which is questioning everything. Critical consciousness is critical or cultural theory is what they're calling it now, where you are critical of all systems of power and oppression. Right. That is the SNESG. So that's what they mean when they say critical. Okay.
Right. It's believing that all systems of society are socially derived or socially constructed, right? So race is constructed, gender is constructed, and it's all like it's so that some people can have power and some people can't. Right. That's what these people believe. And so you have to analyze these structures and criticize them. And that's kind of where that critical consciousness comes from. So they say recent experiences with SEL in schools show promise in improving pro-social behavior and inculcate actions that go beyond just the self, but toward the collective good. And they say this, however, suggests a radical change in our education systems. And this is why this is not an exhaustive list, literally all the ways that social emotional learning is being inserted into the education system. Educator training, accreditation, which, we know a lot of people in the private school industry, as well as in the public school industry, exposing Cognia and NAIS, because they'll come in and they'll say, we need an equity audit. And then they'll take all your data, aggregate it by race, and say, well, your kids of color aren't succeeding as much as your white students. Therefore, that's evidence of racism. And now we need to bring in the DEI, and we need to bring in the CRT, and we need to bring in the SEL to completely shift your culture to not be racist. But they never, ever bring up the fact that it might have to do with the fact that a lot of kids of color, unfortunately, have broken homes or live in cities that are filled with crime, maybe have a lower socioeconomic status, right? And that all affects them.
Right. Well, and if they can't find a disparity of outcome in terms of educational outcomes, what they'll do is just talk about the sheer number of people in the school, right? That's always either the next part. It's you don't have enough. So what's keeping them from being included, right? What's keeping them from being in the classroom? And nothing quite fixes that problem like a voucher, right? And or fixes the problem, so to speak. But now after they fix that problem, what they'll move to more than even they are now is this outcome based situation. And this is the danger of pragmatism in general when you're talking about using data to justify anything it is that you want to do, right? Because data can be skewed in a multitude of different ways. To say, just by the way you ask a question, just by the way that you put more emphasis on one point more than the other. So just putting that into this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, totally and completely
Mhm.
right, right? So, I mean, it's literally it's coming from the governor's emergency relief funds. It's coming from, again, I mentioned ESSA earlier and the mandates there. All of
ARPA.
the yeah, exactly. The statewide longitudinal data systems now require a shift in reporting. Policy, like we mentioned, administrative rules that just the State Board of Ed will come up with on their own. They a lot of times rule by administrative rule. We'll talk about that later too.
Mhm.
Strategic planning. We had strategic planners called Education Elements come into my school district and say, you need more SEL and you need to shift your whole entire accountability system to personalized competency-based learning. And so we'll go over that too a little bit later.
Mhm.
So all of these things make it so that you have to teach, measure, and track children's social emotional skills. I'm not going to go into that because we just kind of did, but just ESSA and No Child Left Behind and the Improving America Schools Act, Goals 2000, all of this made it so that we have to embed SEL as and report and track SEL.
So just because I know I have some people watching, Jenny White, Linda Murphy, and people
Mhm,
here in Oklahoma who did lots and lots of great work on the Common Core issue and lots of great
mhm,
work on, they really fought to roll back Common Core, but it must be understood that a lot of what they wanted from Common Core still happened in Oklahoma,
yep,
and this is the next step,
mhm,
right? This is the next step, and I'm not sure that they all knew that race and gender and all that stuff would be injected the way that it was at that point, but they were on the right track. And so anybody that followed the Common Core fight and the work that was done on that, this is the next step, and this is the next step in pushing towards this sustainable education model that
right.
they uncovered with Common Core. Go ahead.
Right, because if you can take away local control, right, and then say, and interestingly enough, I have this huge chart, and I cover it through my Sinister SEL series on my YouTube channel, Parents Patriots. But basically, I show how the same folks behind the Common Core initiatives are the same folks, because UNESCO is heavily involved in that too, same folks behind social emotional learning. And it's because if they, and those, bless those people who fought so hard against Common Core, long before I got involved in this fight, because they could see it coming, right? They said, if they can nationalize standards around the academic skills that kids are supposed to learn. And even then during Common Core, they started inserting SEL teaching into those standards, like measuring grit and perseverance,
Mm-hmm.
when kids were solving math problems. Uh, I think they foresaw that this could happen around kids emotional, like you could nationalize what people are supposed to think and feel and believe, and
Mm-hmm.
this is what's happening completely through social emotional learning. And really the goal is to have, like, just like UNESCO talks about, all of society, right? um, the jump from No Child Left Behind to ESSA, made state standards and national standards. They want international standards. They made regular academic assessments into behavioral assessments, and we're going to have that on even a larger scale, right? Embedded into everything. And then the accountability, all the data systems talking to each other so that you can track kids and how much they are buying into these attitudes, mindsets, and behaviors they're supposed
So,
to
so
to
just a quick question. You're saying that if this is an international process, all this data is going towards the ends of the international bodies, so to speak, like UNESCO or UN or whatever, being able to track American children and how they're going to act in the future.
Yes.
So this
Mhm.
is that sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like a subversion of national security.
Oh, completely. I mean, there are people that should be in prison or on trial for allowing this stuff to seep into our education system. And what I'm going to show you with the Internet of Education, that the United States is involved with UNESCO in pushing this agenda.
Wow.
So again, you have to have, how do you hold people accountable to this model? You need a social credit system, and you need a whole lot of data. And as you see through that psychodata paper, that's what they're doing through social emotional learning. So you basically need like a whole SEL is like the pipeline to ESG, right? If you think about it, remember education and
Okay.
workforce pipeline, SEL is the education, the pipeline leads them to ESG. So you have to have a human capital system in place, right? Where everything, the whole purpose of that is to create people for the workforce with the qualities that they want. You have to have a power concentration between both businesses and governments. And then you have to have a system in place where information is digital. It can be shared. It can be,
Access.
accessed. People can
Right.
have a wallet, where they have to show people. Look, think about China's social credit system, right? Their score is out there for everyone to see, right? So people won't give you a loan or say you do something wrong, you don't have internet access. It's literally communofascism,
Yes. Yes.
where you're controlled by the levers of society. And so part of that digital ID is they have to move all the information into blockchain. And so we're going to kind of talk about that's a part of this. And the education piece is just the low-hanging fruit, right? They'll move all of these social emotional competencies into a digital credentials wallet. It'll track their social emotional skills and make sure this whole move to personalized competency-based learning is so that they can kind of decentralize skills, right? And not just decentralize the system, but you have to decentralize the skills. So they're individual things that could be earned by badges and things like that. And so they can put them in the wallet and show their future
Like a
employer.
21st century oh wow, I just lost it. But the where you get the merit badges, basically, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, the scouting, I've watched quite
Boy
a few
Scouting, yeah.
videos. Scouting is huge in this agenda, weirdly enough.
Really?
Yeah. So anyway, and then eventually they'll have a full digital ID, right? You have all your health information there. And, it's not like you can't participate in this society if everything kind of happens at once, right? If that's the only thing that employers will take is digital credentials. If you have to have your health information stored on this because that's the only way that a hospital will see you, et cetera, right? Like, it's just like, moving from the silver coin to the, silver standard
Right.
to whatever. It's like, once they started just taking paper bills, I can't just go to a store and give them my silver coin and say, hey, can you take this as payment?
For the first time, this happened to me the other day. I was at a place with my son, and I walked in and I had cash, and they wouldn't take it.
Yeah, see?
They said, we only take cards. And I was like, I'm not sure that's legal. Like right now,
Right.
at
What
least.
if you don't have a card, right?
Right. Then that's, but that's why you have cash. But it's already, and this is in the middle of Oklahoma. So
Wow.
so there are already places who are not taking cash for payment.
Right. And eventually they just, it'll all be digital, and you have to, and again, your banking information will probably be on this digital ID as well. Multiple factors could be on there. And then the question is, like, will the websites you visited be accessible on there? Like, how far can they go to track what you're doing to say you're not living up to the government standards? So business, and yet people will say, well, it's a free market system, you can just go somewhere else. But what if there is no, like, what if everyone's doing that?
Right. Well, and I
What
heard
if there's
somebody
control?
talk, and it might have been you actually talking about when it comes to the choice. Well, it's you either have a myriad of choices or it's multiple choice where you have 4 possible options, but all the options are the same, just with
Right.
a different title, right? If you limit the choice, but you still get a choice, it's just the appearance of choice, right? It's like
Right.
you can go to Burger King or McDonald's, but they're both fast food, right?
Right. There's slight differences in the burger, but in the end of the day, it's a burger.
Right.
Right. Totally true. And so this is kind of how it's all going to go down. I think and people think, well, it's not possible. Like, this is crazy. Well, guess what? They're already tracking and measuring and scoring your children's social emotional skills. This is a dashboard from Panorama Education. and they're literally tracking if they're in the green or the yellow or the red, and then having targeted interventions. Building small groups where they teach them more social emotional learning or work on these skills with them. So again, if someone's able to basically classify what these skills are and have a monopoly over what these skills mean, right, and how you demonstrate them, we're in a world of hurt, because I might classify perspective taking different than you.
Mm-hmm.
I might classify empathy different than you. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is where a lot of this very scary stuff is already happening. And they say in this panorama video that I'm sure I won't be able to play because you won't be able to hear it, that they align everything to CASEL's standards, which is the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. And I'll tell you why that's a big deal in a minute. But for instance, this is a survey, because what Panorama does is they give surveys, and you can create surveys in their platform. And Panorama Education was actually in the news last year, if you remember, because while parents were showing up to school board meetings and protesting against CRT and SEL and all these other things, they weren't protesting against SEL yet, but now now people I think are starting to catch on. But Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, said that parents were domestic terrorists. They worked with the NSBA and the White House. It finally came out that they worked with the White House too. And interestingly enough, his son-in-law, Zan Tanner, with an XAN, was one of the co-founders of Panorama Education, who's measuring all these skills. And I know some parents defending ed and other people came out exposing, they're asking questions about children's gender and race and all those things. But for instance, this is a survey, and you have to ask yourself in that first question, when they say, how often do you spend time at school with children from different races, ethnicities, or cultures? If they answer almost never, will this count against their score in social perspective taking? For instance, in the last question there, this is a different survey. How well does your school help students speak out against racism? And they say almost not at all well. Will they have the Department of Justice come in and take over your school district, like what's happened in my state, in Davis?
So what happened there?
So they had some complaints. OCR came in and investigated, and the DOJ basically took over, and now they're data mining racial data. I mean, it's a complete nightmare. It's been covered on Fox.
It was a federal takeover,
basically,
of a school district by the Department of Justice.
Yes, I know.
Wow,
okay. Is right.
How did I miss that? I don't know how I missed that, but everybody look into that and just get ready, because if they did it in Utah, they did it in Utah. I mean, goodness.
Right. Wow. And I think that this is a blueprint for the nation. I think that this is what will happen if school districts do not comply with these equity demands, trying to be foisted on them by that whole list of things that I had on that one slide. They will do it by force.
Yeah.
And so watch out, parents. It's happening.
Well, and I want to underscore this just real quick. That private schools are absolutely not immune because of Title IX. And I mean, you might get into that later, so I don't want to step on your toes. But
I'm not going to get into it, so you go ahead and talk.
Okay, there was a ruling out of the district court 2, district court, federal district court, that any private institution, religious or not, that's 501c3, that's an educational institution, is subject to federal Title IX regulations, because they're getting a tax exemption, which makes them tax supported basically by the federal government. So the federal strings then bypass the state, right, and go straight into a private school that is 501c3. And then if you have vouchers or state money going into that school now, then you have a state funding of a federally regulated school.
Yeah,
so it's a bypass. And now that's in only the second district court, but it's going to be at least 3 years before that hits the Supreme Court.
Right.
And if if the wrong people are on that court, that becomes law, or the interpretation of the law across the
Hmm.
country. That's all the strings that the government will ever need to get into your private schools.
Oh, yes. Oh,
So,
among others, right? I know a lot of private
right.
schools took COVID funding.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of strings attached to that too, and regulations. Again, these accountability measures. A lot of people say, well, this school isn't taking federal money necessarily, right? But they don't realize that even so, if your state is taking federal money and they have to report back, and that money that the state is in charge of, like the public funding, public school money, which is ESA and voucher bills. What is that money from? It's from the public education fund. They have to comply
Yep.
with those reporting mechanisms, which means that they're going to assess you, they're going to put it in the standards, and that's
They're
just
going to
how
give
it
you
is.
surveys, which Oklahoma just put in just last year, of these surveys that have to go to every kid.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a lot of the same questions that were on the panorama survey,
Yeah.
including questions about guns, right?
Yeah.
And when you
See.
combine that with the new red flag law, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the time the kid turns 18, if they don't have a good breakdown of the surveys they've taken from the time they were 5 years old until they're 18, if the government deems them unfit, they won't be able to buy a gun.
Right.
Right. And that means something to Oklahomans, especially. Right. So
Right.
it's circumventing using the mental health apparatus. And something that Kelly Sky showed me the other day was that Oklahoma has more of these mental health offices, more of these apparatuses, than California does right now.
It's crazy.
It's insane.
Right.
And we're the reddest state in the country. Uh-huh. Sorry, keep going.
I know. Well, you're talking to somebody who lives in Utah,
Right.
right? Which, I'm a California refugee. I left there 10 years ago to escape the craziness that was going on there. I think we left right about the right time. But I came into a state that is extremely religious. I'm not LDS, but there's a huge LDS community here. They're really family oriented. You think this was the last place that some of this stuff would be happening, but here I am. And I got here because of Second Step. It was slated to be taught in my child's school last year. And I just started looking into it and started being very concerned. And that's what kind of gave me the hint that the social emotional learning stuff was all about eventually inculcating a social credit system in society. So at that point is when I became a educational activist, I guess, or parent activist, whatever you want to call me, educational whistleblower. But you can see just some of the stuff that we found. Again, this is critical race theory tenets being taught through the social emotional learning program. And of course, they wouldn't say right out that power and privilege, that white people had the most power and privilege, but then they would show these cartoons throughout the lessons where white people were almost always in the position of the aggressor and people of color in the role of the victim. So of course, they'd make those associations. Heavy on LGBTQIA activism and racial activism. This is from 8th grade. I don't know. What does that look like? That looks like anarchy to me. That looks like BLM, Black Power. They're instructed to choose a disruption strategy. When we talked about critical consciousness earlier and tearing down the systems, they say in order to be, it's not enough just to be not racist, right? You have to be an anti-racist. That's that whole thing of you have to be an activist willing to tear the whole system down because it's set up to oppress certain people. This is not at all weird, right? Let's find the thing that doesn't belong, people. Because I don't know, this is like example goals they can make in 6th grade. And when I was 11, working for a social justice organization was kind of nowhere on my radar.
Yeah.
They introduce comprehensive sexuality education concepts like consent. The difference between sexual harassment and flirting is how you felt about it. If people are going to show you pictures of a sexual nature at school, it's not that it was never okay, but that the category it fell in based on, if it bothered you.
Yeah.
They had sexually inappropriate links in there that led to this loveisrespect.org, which led to Scarletine, where they could learn how to have a safe self-managed medical abortion, and other links to Planned Parenthood. And then second step, of course, say they subscribe to Castle's new definition of transformative SEL. So of course being the curious person I was, I went down that rabbit hole too. And I found out that Castle is the standard bearer for SEL, which means that they set the 5 core competencies and definition of SEL, and all these SEL programs have to measure up to it because they rate and review all of the programs that people accept into their states. And in fact, many states won't even accept programs that aren't Castle approved. And in 2020, they changed their whole framework, right? They changed their definitions. Here you see in their 2020 roadmap for reopening, social awareness now means you have to acknowledge the ongoing individual and institutional impacts of systemic racism. So you have to buy in to the critical race theory tenet that, again, all systems are set up to oppress people of color. Again, they changed their definition. It's about redistributing power. Gee, that doesn't sound Marxist. To promote social justice through increased engagement in school and civic life, because they believe that if you don't teach SEL through this racial and equity lens, they call it white supremacy with a hug, because you're not acknowledging that people of color are growing up in this systemically racist environment, and that they're harmed by that. This is just more, again, they believe that this is from their own paper, racialized oppression was foundational to the establishment of the United States, just more evidence. Interestingly enough, so Karenga is a global alliance for social emotional learning and life skills. And so this was at the time, now she's stepped down as the president and CEO of Castle. She's on this board, global steering committee with UNESCO, and also members from Committee for Children who own Second Step. Kind of weird, right? Global Alliance for SEL. I wonder what they want to do, UNESCO, what they want to do with SEL. And so all of them, the whole purpose of all 3 of these organizations is to, again, create a critical consciousness in children so that they become social justice activists for particular causes and ideologies. And so this is, again, Castle, they came out saying racialized oppression was foundational to the establishment of the United States. And yet 40 states have collaborated with Castle in what they call a Collaborating States Initiative. So they've agreed to align education and workforce policy through an SEL lens. And as a part of this career and workforce development, want to teach kids as early as preschool, start that indoctrination early in social emotional learning all the way up through high school to then eventually move them into the career workforce. Again, we need that human capital formation link side of that social credit system. And so again, they're embedding SEL into everything. They bring together business leaders, state leaders, and institutions of higher education that are all what, Mark?
Yeah.
Woke, right?
Yes, exactly.
To further develop and refine workforce readiness and education policies and practices that embed SEL. So there you go. You have the businesses working with the higher ed, working with K through 12 to turn your child into a social justice activist in enslavement, basically, to the ESGs. And which now we know what are the ESGs based on, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so they are asking these people, what do you want to, what should we be teaching our kids? And they're telling them, and they're working it into everything. So this is just to say my state's done this. They have completely bought in. Utah's Portrait of a Graduate. Almost all these skills are social emotional. Interestingly enough, many states have Portrait of a Graduate. You should look, if your audience, you should look to see if you have one in Oklahoma. And there are plenty all around the nation as well. And it's actually a national program from a Gates-funded company called Battelle for Kids. And they work with Excel and Ed, who's really behind the school choice movement, and Aurora Institute. Go ahead and look into them. They're awful.
Yes.
And Knowledge Works. And again, all those are Gates-funded companies, weird, to bring in this Portrait of a Graduate. And then what they do is they put out a document here in Utah called Guide to Education Flexibility, and that's where they also are moving us into this personalized competency-based learning structure, where we're just moving away from what is a merit-based grading system as a form of school accountability to now this competency-based decentralized model of accountability, where it's like learn anytime, anywhere, and you can just check off your competencies as like badges. So KnowledgeWorks is actually working with our state to do that as well, and they are future forecasters. And they say they want to do this on their website because they believe grading is racist and a tool of the colonizer, mostly because there's disparities in outcome, right? Again, we talked about if students grow up in not a stable home or lower socioeconomic factors, that it's going to affect their grades. And that's not a racist problem. That is a class problem. And so they view personalized competency-based learning as a path to liberatory education. In fact, they gamed out like 4 scenarios, and they said really where they want to go is this liberatory education model where instead of having SEL fused into every subject, academic subject, it'll be critical theory. What we know this as is Freirean education, right? The purpose of education is not to actually teach people how to read and how to do math. It's to raise a critical consciousness. And I actually even found there is a regional education lab that there's different sets of them across the United States. And they kind of influence policy in regards to education. And they literally say in a slideshow that I found, I posted on my Twitter, that SEL was to raise a critical consciousness. Love that. So in this, one of those 4 scenarios that KnowledgeWorks gamed out, they said, if there wasn't enough systems change, right? They weren't able to get their agenda through enough in society and enough in education, that people would flee the public education system and turn to micro schools, where they were teaching this liberatory education model. And interestingly enough, there is already testing grounds for this model going on right now, and it's being funded by the Koch and Walton Family Foundation, called 4.0 Schools, and it's part of the initiative Yes Every Kid. So Walton and Koch both donated $5 million to this initiative, and so again, they say here on 4.0's website, they want to have like a 6-month giving circle, and it's to build skills, relationships, identities, and collective power. Collective is a communist term. It's where the needs of society over trump your needs as an individual. But the whole reason they have this giving circle just for Black leaders is because they say philanthropy is just too white, and they need to take power away for themselves. And they even say this in their playbooks. This is one of 4.0's playbook, and they say they want to decentralize the system, which we hear a lot from the school choice movement, right? They want to take power away from the public education system. But in this case, their vision is to take it away so that they can, again, make it more about liberatory education. Wow. And 4.0 Schools funds things like woke kindergarten. Unfortunately, I can't play this video for you. I think it's pretty alarming. It's on my Twitter right now. She says, "Yellow,
if you can send it to me, I could play it with the sound. If you just send me the tweet."
Well,
it's okay.
I'm just going to say, what? Hold on 1 second. It somehow screwed up.
Oh, no.
I know. I don't know what happened. Here. Okay, hold on. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to say what she says. She says, "Rainbow baby, this is a lesson for kindergartners. Yellow. Can you find the color yellow? Purple. Can you find the color purple? Red. Can you find the color red?" And it goes on, again, this imagery is teaching kindergartners about activism.
Yes.
And that's, again, this is liberatory education in action.
Is this woke kindergarten?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had put some stuff up about that. Yeah. Okay.
You did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other people were talking about it too, but
Yeah.
these lessons are all for kindergartners, right? And it's all about raising a critical consciousness. So you have to ask yourself if the same money stream is funding what we think of as good school choice, right? That's going to give parents more power in choosing the education for their kids is funding the same stuff like woke kindergarten. How do we know that all of this decentralized education model isn't going to end up like woke kindergarten? Especially because there's people like ASU, which is Arizona State University, and Global Silicon Valley behind this movement. And in 2012, they came out with a strategic battle plan. And you can see there where the red arrows are that school choice is part of this plan. And a lot of things on this list have already happened, right? Common Core, No Child Left Behind 2.0, which was the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. Et cetera, universal tablets. You see at the 10-year mark there, though, they want to eliminate locally elected school boards. Because they say, as a part of this document, this is just the chart, right? But they have things that explain every single one of these blue bars. And they say in there it's because the process by which they're elected doesn't correspond with either strategic planning or longer term results. Whose longer term results? Theirs. So what do you do when you don't have elected representation? But they have a plan for that because they want, in the end, the 15-year mark, an open online campus. And so in my research, I actually ran across this slide deck, which was completely alarming to me, called The Internet of Education, and it's from the Learning Economy. And if you look here, these are all the players, right, that will work together to provide education for your children and decide what they're learning and how it's measured and how they're going to track it. So you see Microsoft there, you see IBM, you see Google, so what are all those organizations, Mark?
Woke.
They're woke. Yeah.
Very woke. Very, very woke.
Yes. And then they're going to just silo these systems, right? And they're going to communicate via blockchain technology. And so again, you need a digital wallet for that, and you need the digital credentials and these competencies they're going to mark off. And I unfortunately can't play this video for you, but it's, like I said, it's going to be through blockchain technology. A lot of smart contracts. For instance, you put in work, you're agree maybe to work for an organization later, so maybe they invest in your education and these things like that. But again, it'll be able to be exchanged through blockchain technology. And so they're going to completely try to change our monetary system as well. And they really say, even in a lot of this stuff, and even in that blue chart there, that which one was it? A couple up from the first blocked thing, it says knowledge as a true currency, right? Your knowledge, again, your capital, your human capital potential will be seen as currency in the new economy.
Yeah.
And who's behind the Internet of Education? Gee, this is crazy to me, right? The U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce. There's your SEL to ESG connection right there. UNESCO is on this list. They want a single system so they can have global citizenship education. That's so interesting. Oh, and Walmart. Didn't we just find out that they're one of the huge funders of the school choice movement? Fancy that.
Wow.
And UNESCO recently put out a global education monitoring report. They choose a subject that they want to kind of put out to their community. And this one was about non-state actors in education. And the papers prepared for that. There was this one called Regulating Public-Private Partnerships, Governing Non-State Schools, an Equity Perspective. And they literally say in this paper all the different equity-oriented regulatory strategies they can enforce in public-private partnerships. And they literally say it's because of the funding, right? So they say here, this higher level of autonomy does not mean that PPP schools, public-private partnerships, are exempt from complying with centrally defined curriculums. Okay, so they're going to decide what your kids are learning standards, or student admissions criteria, among other public regulations. Accountability frameworks play a strategic role in promoting that all publicly funded schools, independently of their ownership, are correctly aligned with quality standards and also with the equity, goals, and objectives set by the government. Boom, there you go.
Wow.
And on top of that, I wish I could play this video for you too. Maybe you can play this one. Can you? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
I?
We got to play this one. Can you sit? Oh, I need to go to my thing. Hold on.
Well, you can even just go to Twitter.
Right. That's what
Can I
I'm
send
trying
it
to
to you?
do. Yeah.
Because I
Just send
put
me
it
the
up
link.
there.
You sent me the link.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because this is an important one for you to see. He basically admits what I was just talking about. Sorry, where is my stop sharing button here? Oh, I know I'm in the wrong one. Sorry. Stop screen. Okay, and then I will. I'm sorry, it's taking me a hot minute here.
That's okay. Well, and I think this just all underscores, look, that first of all, there's very serious concerns that the woke issue and the woke lobby is aligned in some way with this school choice apparatus. And you've seen attacks on me and attacks on several different people, including James Lindsay, that seem to come from the same groups of people sharing the same information, and and my concern here is that the school choice lobby is taking the woke issue and using it to sell you the poison. You know what I
Right.
mean? Can you send that to me or the
I
link?
just sent it to you on Twitter.
Oh, you sent it to me on Twitter. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, let me in. Yes, let's show this video. I gotta pull it out. And share. Sorry, I'm technically deficient.
I'm also technically deficient, so we're good.
And come on.
That's what happens when you get technology in your 20s. You
Right? Okay. Let's see this here. Make it big.
Black. Can you find the color black?
Oh, that was the other video.
Oh, that was the other one. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me.
The most recent one I sent you was the
It didn't
video.
come through yet. Hold on, let me. I'll get it. Yeah, but this video is really important. Okay, I only got one, Lisa. Or did you send it in a different? Did you send it in our? That's the one I got. Maybe try send it again.
Huh. Sorry.
Hold on. Let me.
Here.
No, wait.
It's the most latest one I sent you.
It says
ICYMI.
ICYMI.
No. Hold on. That's weird. I copied and pasted. It just didn't work.
Oh. We got gremlins.
I know. Can I just tell you? So the video that I put out yesterday,
Yeah.
I spent like all this time editing it and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden my movie maker like did something crazy and everything had caution triangles on it. And thank goodness for my husband who helped me, because if I would have lost that, it would have been like 9 hours of work completely.
Oh, yeah. No, I've had that happen to me quite a bit, actually. Quite a bit, actually.
And I'm like, there's gremlins. There's people watching who are trying to mess me up. Okay, there you go.
Oh, there
you
it
should
is.
have it now.
There I got it. Yes, I've got it. Hold on. Let me open it. Yeah, everybody needs to see this. Oop, hold on. And of course, I went.
I mean, it's just, and that's the thing. This is all evidence, and I think that people have to when they look at this, they have to realize that like this is the people actually saying this is what we were trying to do.
Right, and that's
right.
really important. Yes, and that's why we want to show it to you, and why I'm making sure we get it up here. So, just 1 second, and. Okay. Almost there.
So this is the chair of the UNESCO's Global Education Monitoring Report.
Oh Lord, I just got kicked out of the stream.
I was like, where'd you go?
Yeah, I just literally got kicked out of the stream.
He told you there's gremlins.
Yes. Okay. Now here we go. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you tell me if you can hear it?
The 2021-2022 Global Education Monitoring Reports rallying call, "Who chooses? Who loses?" invites policymakers to question relationships with non-state actors in terms of fundamental choices and their trade-offs between equity and freedom of choice, two pillars of the right to education, between encouraging initiative and setting standards, between groups of varying means and needs, between immediate commitments under SDG 4 and those to be progressively realized. It calls for governments to see all institutions, students, and teachers as part of a single system, to use common quality standards, common monitoring and support processes for all providers. Governance systems can be complex when multiple actors are involved. This makes oversight that much more important. The report warns that inequality and exclusion can also result if private education is not effectively regulated.
Oh God. Am I there? Can you see me?
The report's peer
It's still
website
going.
will help.
Okay. Sorry. I got
It's
kicked out again.
still going. It's still going.
Oh, it's still going? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. I got kicked out again. I don't
You
know
did.
what happened.
From our policy
Lord,
dialogue
Lord.
on this issue. It tracks and compares non-state provision regulations in 211 countries around the world.
And that's a clip from the peer website for United States.
Wow.
We'll talk about that in a
This
minute.
report reads my mind when it calls on governments to create spaces to foster initiative and to set the conditions
their
for a
initiative.
variety of actors to interact, coordinate, and cooperate. Some people say that non-state actors should not play a role in education. This report shows that, in fact, they already do today and will continue to do so tomorrow. And it is our responsibilities to #write the rules. I encourage you to read the 2021-2022 GEM report recommendations and the vision it has for change.
Right. So if I'm going to share my screen again there.
Yeah.
So yeah, force their initiative.
Wow.
Making all things a single system. I mean, I think your audience heard all of that. Let me get back into my PowerPoint. And so it might have passed by too quickly, but this is actually from that peer website they were talking about, where it has all of the different nation states and how they're going to bring more government regulations into education spaces. And so this clip, it says vision, when he talks about our vision, this is what they're talking about. And I think it's interesting that they literally cite here the ESA and voucher bills that are being pushed by the school choice movement so hard. Because I think they realize that, again, if you bring public funding into private education spaces, you can force all sorts of equity regulations on them. And I find it interesting, too, that the person who American Federation for Children has chosen as the face and name and voice of this movement has been listed on UNESCO's website as an expert for their Inclusive Policy Lab. So
what is the Inclusive Policy Lab?
Well, if you look at the website URL right there, they basically say they're influencing policy, how to tell people how to influence policy in order to make the goal of the UN SDGs by 2030 come to fruition. So they have different groups and experts and organizations attached to that. And I just find it kind of interesting. This webpage has now been taken down. I don't know why, but...
I didn't know it had been taken down. Last time I looked at it.
Yeah, it was really recent. So I don't know. Just, again, something to put in your mind and ask questions about. And the way that they're going to enforce those regulations is through assessments. And it's funny, every time I met with a school choice person here that was pushing these bills, we had one called the Hope Scholarship in Utah this last legislative session. And they're like, but you see this under 534, it says, except as provided in sections 53F, 6403, and respectively, all of these things. A qualifying service provider may not be required to alter the qualifying service provider's creed, practices, admission policy, or curriculum in order to accept scholarship funds. So see, they're protected. But then when you look under those accept clauses, and again, I mentioned the Administrative Rulemaking Act, right? Like already to your audience. I mean, the fact that the state boards of ed are over this, they are already enabled to enact any kind of rules that they want to, because they usually do. So they can tighten the NUSA regulations anytime that they want. But under these accept clauses, that, like one of the ones I circled there, it says at the bottom there that a qualifying service provider shall, when administering an annual assessment required under Section 53F6408, ensure that the qualifying service provider uses a norm referenced assessment. So again, they're requiring assessments. And remember that federal tripod of control: what you assess, you must teach. What you must teach, you have to be in your standards. And then there's a federal anti-discrimination law hidden under one of those accept clauses as well, which will affect their hiring practices. So again, they need all of society in order to do this. So interestingly, one of the UN's and UNESCO's big things right now, their phrase that they keep using is "leave no one behind," which is very kind of creepy. And again, it won't protect them from that. Also, I want to bring up that many states have already in their state constitutions that your state board of education has power, general control, and supervision over public education. What is public education? Anything that uses public funding.
That's right.
And so this is why I think we're seeing a lot of lawsuits pop up in states, because there's a power struggle going on between the folks that pass these bills and the governing bodies for that. If it's not the State Board of Ed and the State Board of Ed saying, but hey, we should have power over this. And what happened in my state of Utah when charters came on the scene should be a cautionary tale for people. The Charter School Board Association was so confident in the fact that they should be autonomous that they took the USBE, the Utah State Board of Ed, to court and literally argued that they should not be able to have, be under their thumb. And it went all the way up to the Utah Supreme Court. And in the end, because of Article 10, Section 3 of our Utah Constitution, they ruled that the Utah State Board of Education has plenary power over education. So passing a bill like the Hope Scholarship in my state, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that the USBE is just going to sit back like with the USBA and say, oh, yeah, you can have autonomy, it's okay? Or do you think that they're going to force their government equity initiatives? And I think that it's going to be the latter.
Yeah.
And we just, again, a monopoly of all systems. Education is just a low-hanging fruit. This is from that same slideshow from the Learning Economy. Think MasterCard for digital credentials. And you see that W3C, that's the new World Wide Web Consortium, which is going to have a whole lot more regulations than the current internet does. And you're just going to store them in a wallet. And again, this personalized competency-based learning, as well as school choice, the whole goal is a decentralization of education, but it's not for the benefit of you, parents. It's for the benefit of them having more power and control. And they're going to measure those social emotional competencies. And we kind of already talked about this, the digital ID. And just another piece of evidence is that I recently came out with an article called The Theft of Education as well as my video. And in it, I talked about how ASCA, the American School Counselors Association, and NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, have both changed what it means to be college and career ready. So NACE has come out, you see that bottom left there? That's one of their 8 competencies to show that you're ready for the workforce: equity and inclusion. Oh, and what's that last sentence? Engage in anti-racist practices that actively challenge the system, structures, and policies of racism. And here's just some of the sample behaviors that they have that you have to demonstrate, right? So you may get a bunch of good grades and you may study well for your tests and you know, do all the things, right? Extracurricular activities, whatever it is. And then parents and students are going to wonder why these recruiting professionals aren't going after them. And it's because maybe they didn't score well enough in social justice activism. ASCA, like I said, changed their student mindsets and behaviors. So the American School Counselors Association have a national model, and as a part of that, they put out 3 major documents: the ethical standards and professional standards, which is really directed toward the counselors themselves. And they literally have to pledge, and Courage is a Habit is totally done a good job exposing this on Twitter, but they literally have to pledge to be social justice activists, to be counselors. I mean, like they say that is their job, is systems change, transformational change. And so they, in 2021, changed their student mindsets and behaviors, which is that 3rd document, and that's directed towards students. And what they did is they crosswalked them with Learning for Justice, which used to be Teaching for Tolerance's social justice standards, which means that they make these standards align, however they need to make them align. And so, what it means to be college and career ready. And because that's the thing, these codes that you see there on the left, those are all, counselors use those to create learning objectives for students in order to help them to be college and career ready. So, and they actually have to fill out these forms and cite the codes. And so you wonder are our counselors back there putting the codes down and saying, oh, well, this person's not anti-racist enough, right? So maybe they need more instruction in this, this, and this. So you wonder how that's also playing out on the back end. I would love to know that as far as on students' records stored in the statewide longitudinal data systems. So again, now because of this, right, all students are at risk of not graduating with the correct mindsets and behaviors, which is why they can justify bringing social emotional learning in as a tier 1 or whole school intervention and a lot of these, Anita Hogue at Hogue Anita on Twitter has been doing a great job also showing that they're using this to bill Medicaid as well. Schools are applying for partial hospitalization codes and using these DSM codes to basically double dip, I think, in the funding, which is something that some legislator or something should look into. If we could get the attention, right, of our legislators and the media, the ASCA thing alone should be front page news, right? We've literally completely said that in order for kids to graduate, they have to be social justice activists. I mean, that's a huge problem. And really where this is going, the medicalization of our schools, is that they want to eventually move to a completely different model. Well, school is this community hub and it's a whole school service provider. And Kelly, as you just said, Kelly Ski at Kelly SKE, she also has a Time to Stand podcast, has done a wonderful job exposing the CDC's involvement, the WHO's involvement, and a bunch of other players in this push to make community schools, basically Arnie Duncan's wet dream of having school be like replace the parents and be like the parents visit the kids at the school and the kids are just there learning and having all sorts of health services done. And I mean, it's really disgusting. This is a great triangle because it shows how social emotional learning, critical race theory, and critical pedagogy, as well as comprehensive sexuality education is all baked into the same cake. And work kind of symbiotically together. And again, remember, all of this stuff is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals as well. And this is the WISC model, basically the 10 domains that, and the WISC stands for whole school, whole child, whole community. And this will also include sexual and reproductive health. And so we see already the WISC model being implemented in California, where they actually literally have Planned Parenthood clinics at the high schools. So this should alarm every single parent. And you should be keeping your eye out to make sure that these WISC standards aren't coming into your states, because what they'll do is they'll write them into the health standards. And again, back to that, we need all of these systems to work together to create this social credit system. and SEL, ESG, the push for backpack funding, these school choice bills, and these finance reforms toward blockchain technology are all linked and part of a larger global agenda of social behaviorism, right? Getting kids to think, act, and feel a certain way, learning the child, having computer adaptive assessments so that they can move their minds. I mean, there's sick people actually investing in this stuff. How much can we move children's minds? And it's really what you said, going to be a communo-fascist, top-down, bottom-up control of all aspects of human life. And we have to push back against this. Or the U.S., just like China, will have a social credit system. And it's going to be like ESG on steroids, but in like literally every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So that's my presentation. And I think we need to come. I know. Sorry, it's so depressing. I know. Someone actually commented on that on James Lindsay's post when he posted this. He's like, "This is so depressing."
Yes. Well, but here's the thing: is that people are going. This is so ingrained, and this comes from both sides of the aisle right now.
Mm-hmm.
When James Lindsay talks about the regime, when James Lindsay talks about all of those, pie in the conspiracy theories, this right here shows you that it's not a conspiracy theory.
Nope. It is a conspiracy, but not a conspiracy theory.
Exactly. And and they have attacked him, they're attacking me, they're going to attack you, they're attacking all kinds of people who dare to cross the line, because the most popular people on the right now are the people who are just pro school choice, right? No matter what, as long as they're unwoke. You know what I mean?
Right.
And anybody who crosses the deferential and asks any kind of question about it gets attacked.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting, Mark, that one of the talking points of the people pushing these bills they do not have as one of their talking points, I should say, the fact that you can escape these woke schools and it's going to be fine. Right. You're going to take the money and you're going to, because, and I actually found like one of those policy papers they put out to the people, and it had all their talking points on it. I discovered that for the Hope Scholarship here in Utah. And that literally it said, don't call it backpack funding. Why? Because then maybe people will find out that along with that money following the backpack, that data backpack that requires all of these SEL things and making sure they're college and career ready, et cetera, is going to follow them into the next education field they go to, right? They also say, don't say it's to escape the woke indoctrination. Well, and you wonder why.
Right. Well, I just want to point this out. The concept of equity, when we're talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is all about engineering outcomes. Outcomes-based education. Everything that we talk about has been framed under the mechanism of outcomes-based education. By definition, because we're all individuals, trying to engineer outcomes in any situation, whether it's education or income or just general success or power or anything like that, is by definition wokeism.
Yep.
It is by definition wokeism. And so when you're talking about, if you are against engineering outcomes or redistributing wealth, because when we talk about vouchers and we're talking about this situation, when you talk about the redistribution of wealth, because not everybody that pays into the education system pays in your $7,000 or $8,000 per pupil, right? That comes from companies. It comes from, because you're talking about most often in most states, property taxes, right? So companies, what I see this is an end run around companies trying to get their taxes back. Because if you have Amazon that has this huge plant, right? How much property taxes are they paying towards education? Right? Yeah. Just a majority of it, right? They're paying a majority of it, right? And if you then have the state give the vouchers to be able to go into private schools that are going to be corporate sponsored,
right,
then you've just created a mechanism for them to get their money back. It's just like a big tax break.
Right. Well, and I think that that's one thing to mention is that the money behind this lobby is huge, like
Huge.
huge. And so there are people waiting in the wings for these bills to be passed so they can bring forth their solutions like woke kindergarten. And that's the problem. If those solutions are the ones that are most funded, those are the ones that are going to survive. And we have to do everything we can not to make sure that this becomes the Walmart of education. Walmart, took over small businesses and communities and then became the thing. And so how do we stop this from happening in the school choice movement?
Yeah. And I think that, remember that for this lobby and for this movement to destroy you is no loss,
Mm-mm.
and they will go after anybody. They will take you down from any platform, because here's the other part about this is that those trying to speak out about this are being attacked from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be an indication to people that this is bigger, and that just because you have an R or a D in front of your name doesn't make doesn't make that person or that politician pro parental freedom, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if I just can't help but think that if you're supporting this mechanism and you're using wokeness as the way to do it, something's wrong. Because
Right.
every indication is that wokeness will remain. And what the largest indication for me, beyond just the easiest thing to understand, is that every school will still be filled with woke teachers and administrators supported by woke universities.
Absolutely.
And
Mm-hmm.
nobody, not a politician in a red, blue, or purple state, is going after their universities for this.
Right. Or going after the teacher credentialing, or
Right.
going after the accreditation lines, or going after, they are still going to be doing business with the same people, the same captured market. And
Right.
that's why when people say this is a free market system, it'll work it out. No, it won't. It's not a free market system right now. There are positionalities of power that are going to prevent this from operating in a free market way.
That's right. That's right. And what do you do? I mean, what do we do other than speak out? And it's going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take a lot of understanding, because everything that we say will be twisted.
Right.
And that's what has been happening. I've seen it done to Lisa. I've seen it done to James. I've seen it done to Kelly. I've seen it done to me. All everybody that speaks out about this gets attacked on one level or another, and usually by very well funded people.
Right. Or I love the talking points, right? I've seen it happen a lot where these states won't pass these bills. I know in my own state of Utah, thankfully it failed. I think people saw all the strings and were like, heck no, we're not voting for that. And then I had someone in the school choice lobby posting on their Twitter that, these legislators voted to fund systems, not students, and painting them in a bad light because they
Right.
literally were trying to protect educational freedom in our state. And I think that kind of rhetoric is irresponsible
It's
at
false.
at best and nefarious at
Right.
least.
Well, and we saw the same thing here in Oklahoma, where conservatives were attacked because they of a one vote in March.
Right. Or making it part of the Republican Party platform when it has nothing to do with the Republican Party platform, and then saying that you should vote for this person based upon whether or not they support this legislation. I mean, every bill is different for one, right? I mean, you don't know. I mean, Arizona was at least able to pass some amendments that got the assessment portion of that bill out. Thank goodness, right? But it doesn't address all those other things, right, that we just talked about. But that's the thing. Like mine had so many strings attached. It could have been a marionette puppet. By the fifth version of the bill, it was no longer hidden under an accept clause. It was just adamant out there. We're going to assess the heck out of you.
Right.
And so we can't be like blanket statements where you're not a real Republican if you don't support this legislation. I mean, that's extremely terrible thinking.
Yeah, it is. And that's the one thing I cannot stand is manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who's been the victim of much manipulation of myself, even in the media and things like that, it is the woke do it with a goal. And it's always they spin words on you, they spin stories on you, they spin narratives, and they will hold you accountable for things that they don't themselves hold standards for. And that's the other part of this, is that you're having people who are framing this conservative narrative but pushing something. School choice was the brainchild of two communist professors out of Berkeley, California in 1978, who did it and with the explicit desire to create equity, is what they said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
And
hear that
they,
word a lot by the school choice lobby. It's to create equity.
yes,
I have been called an elitist and a plant for the teachers union by people from the school choice lobby, because of my stance on this school choice bills, because I'm trying to protect all students, all
right,
children. But they just say, you don't care about poor Black babies.
right,
That is not the case. I care about every child. The reason I'm speaking out about this, the reason I'm trying to bring some logic and some reason into this conversation, is because I care about the future of our kids. I don't want them to have a social credit system. I don't want these public-private partnerships to have control. And if we are sacrificing that for a short-term solution of taking government funds so we can flee whatever situation we're in, and granted, some people are in some terrible situations, and I get the desperation. We have to think about, what about our grandchildren? What about our great-grandchildren? Are they going to have educational freedom if we fall for this trap? And so that's what we have to be thinking about. We cannot think short term. So my solution, people take me to task a lot, right? Like, so what's your solution then?
right.
Right.
Well, doing something in the name of doing something is not a
Right.
virtue. Doing something stupid in
Right.
the name of doing something is not a virtue.
Right. No. And I think, actually, I was laughing because I think it was James that said it. He was like, well, let me just cook up a solution real quick in my kitchen for something they've been working on for the last however many decades, right?
Right.
It's not going to be easy, right? Their change has been incremental. Their change has been total and complete. But I think that the way out of this is not to rely on the government. It's to rely on the thing that we've relied on for centuries, and that is community. And if a family wants to get out of a situation, I know lots of amazing moms here in Utah that homeschool 10 kids, right? They basically like run a co-op, and that way the parents can share the cost of the curriculum, and the parents can share they can carpool, and they can figure out a way to make educational freedom options happen, by just supporting each other, right, within the community. And so I think those are the kinds of solutions we should be talking about, and really seriously start thinking about building a parallel system. Because here's the problem: if we allow these government regulations into homeschools and private schools, more than they already are, right? Especially as private schools. I mean, private schools we know already have a lot of problems, but especially homeschool. If we allow it to get into that, there will literally be no choices left to run to.
That's right. And
And
that's, I think,
so,
the goal. It's to eliminate the actual choices, right?
completely.
This is what I call a preemptive narrative, right? If you throw out something that call it choice, but in the long term, it eliminates choice. It makes it impossible to critique them using the backbone of what it is they're trying to take away.
Right. Or they've just completely redefined the word. School
Right.
choice means
Which
being
is a
able to
very
go
woke
outside
thing to do.
Yeah. School choice means to be able to go outside your zip code and choose the educational option that works best for your family. That is truly the definition of school choice, right? It's not having the government fund your education option.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
How do you remove the influence of government schools by injecting government money into private schools?
right.
Answer
Yeah.
that question for me.
Yeah. Well, it goes
Anybody.
back to that cartoon that I posted. I'm a huge Simpsons fan. So, you can question my humor if you want to. But there's this scene where, Stampy the elephant had flown, went to the tar pits, and Homer was they were all trying to save him. And Homer gets stuck in the tar pit and he's sinking, and they're like, "Dad, you're sinking." And he goes, "Okay, well, I'll just pull out my legs with my arms." And he sticks his arms in, and then he's still sinking, and he's like, "And now I'm going to pull my arms out with my face,"
Yeah. That's
And
right.
you can think of the tar pit as government schools. You don't get out of the government school debacle by inserting more government.
Exactly.
You just don't.
Right. And all of these talking points are deceptive. They are woke style talking points. And that's what honestly set me off on it at the beginning. And I have been threatened. I James has been threatened. People have been threatened for daring to speak against this, or not, or even just bring up questions of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people have to understand that when if someone's trying to cut out your tongue, it's because they're scared of what you're going to say. And Lisa has been doing the most amazing work,
Oh, thanks.
and has been getting to the right people. That Glenn Beck even talked about this the other day on his show, and talking
But then
about
he
how
had Corey on. But then he had Corey on to
oh he
ask
did
him, you know, um, if there were regulations in these bills. And I don't know about you, Mark, but if I was curious as to whether the snake oil salesman was selling me snake oil, I wouldn't ask the snake oil salesman.
yeah
I'd probably ask
well
like an unbiased party who doesn't have anything to gain or lose from the matter. And that's the other point, is that I'm not doing this because it's fun. I don't get anything out of this at all. Zero. I'm not funded by anybody. I'm a mom making videos in my basement because I care about our kids. And the people who are out there trying to spin this narrative, they have something to gain.
yes
And I think it's important for people to think about that as they
yes
think about both sides of this argument.
they have something to gain, and they're willing to step on whomever that gets in their way, and that has become increasingly more obvious. Um, and when you say that you're getting nothing out of it, I think what you are getting out of it is stress and strife.
True.
I know that's what I'm getting out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That that kind of feeling of fighting an uphill battle, and trying to get the truth out to people so they know that they're not taking the poison pill.
Yeah.
Or at least if you're going to take the poison pill, know what's in it. You know what I mean? That if you choose it,
Full
that's
disclosure,
your
right?
choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But doing so by manipulation, through marketing manipulation, is literally how the woke sold DEI.
Yep.
And to see that it's so connected now is should be alarming to everyone. It should be
Right.
alarming to everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
we've gone almost 2 hours now, but I really appreciate it. Lisa, you can find Lisa at the Parents of Patriots podcast and the Education Manifesto on Substack. She is she got her Twitter handle up here at I
Mm-hmm.
am Lisa Logan. Find her
And
there.
I just started a Truth Social on that same handle.
Okay. Yes. So find her there when she gets kicked off of Twitter. Uh, and follow everything she does. She's telling the truth. And here's the thing. This is what I want to say too. Anybody who disagrees with us can come talk to us. That's the one thing too. It's like nobody will engage past a talking point. You know what I
Right.
mean? And to sit and have a long form discussion about it with somebody who can actually argue with you. It's like I would love to see Lisa Logan and Corey DeAngelis on the same show. right? I would love to see that, or any other school choice representative on a Joe Rogan kind of styled show, or a Glenn Beck, or somebody that would sit there and ask questions, and that prove us wrong, and we'll be wrong. That's the thing too. It's like, if I want to be wrong. That's
Right.
I'm
I
more
feel
than
you. Yes.
I want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because we don't, we don't want parents to be stuck. Right. And
Yeah.
it's, again, it's an atrocity. It's a crime. Literally, they're experimenting on our kids. What is happening in the public schools and the private schools. And if we want to really protect kids and their future, we have to come up with a solution that's actually going to work.
Yeah, we do. That's right. But it has to work towards the ends of actually educating kids, and
Mm-hmm.
not,
Indoctrinating
preparing
them.
them for a sustainable workforce.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I hope everybody got something out of this. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and share, hit the bell, all of those things that I have to say at the end of the thing. But thank you, Lisa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.